They arrived at the naval base that morning with the usual swagger that filled the air when young soldiers thought they owned the world. The sound of boots striking concrete, the laughter of new recruits echoing through the hangar, the metallic clang of tools and the scent of jet fuel. It was a place where egos clashed louder than engines, and among those who strutted with confidence was Lieutenant Drake, known across the base as the loudest and cockiest pilot in the squadron. His friends followed his lead, their voices booming with jokes about the incoming recruits, because today a new officer was being assigned to their unit. No one knew much about her, only that she was coming from Central Command with impressive credentials. The men expected another stiff uniform type, someone they could easily size up and show how things really worked on the field. So when she arrived, the laughter barely dimmed. The woman stepped out of a black SUV dressed in crisp navy blue, the sun glinting off the insignia on her shoulder, but the insignia was subtle, nothing that screamed high rank. She carried herself quietly, her posture firm yet graceful, her eyes calm and watchful, like someone measuring every movement around her. She introduced herself simply as Commander Alara. The room went silent for a second as her tone carried an unexpected authority, but Drake smirked, leaned against a crate and said softly to his friend, "She's too clean. She probably has never flown anything bigger than a drone." Alara caught his words, though she said nothing. She only smiled and nodded slightly before walking past them into the hangar, her footsteps echoing behind her. By afternoon she had already inspected the planes, reviewed flight logs and spoken with the chief mechanic. Everyone noticed how precise her questions were, how she seemed to know every detail about the engines, flight paths and even the pilots themselves. Yet the younger officers only saw a woman who spoke softly and didn't bark orders. They mistook her quietness for weakness, and Drake whispered again, "We'll see how long she lasts." The next day came with an early morning drill, the roar of engines filling the air, the pilots lined up ready for flight maneuvers. When Alara appeared, she stood near the control tower, her hands behind her back, observing the formation without saying a word. When the simulation began, she moved closer to the flight control console and in a calm voice began giving instructions, her tone even and steady, like she'd done this for years. But Drake rolled his eyes. "She's reading from a manual," he muttered over the comms, thinking she wouldn't hear him, but she did. She replied, "Lieutenant, perhaps you'd like to demonstrate a better approach if you think this one is textbook." The silence that followed cut through the radio static. Drake hesitated, then replied, "Sure ma'am, with pleasure." He took off, pulling sharp turns, daring maneuvers, showing off his skill until the jet wavered dangerously low near the ground. The control team gasped, but before anyone could react, Alara's voice came through, cold, precise, "Lieutenant, bring your nose up 2 degrees, adjust throttle by 0.5, disengage right, roll now." Her words snapped through his headset. Drake obeyed instinctively. The jet steadied at the last second, landing perfectly. Alara's voice returned, softer this time, "Next time listen before you fall." Everyone looked at each other, stunned. She had saved him without moving from her spot. Drake climbed out of the jet, sweat on his forehead, trying to cover his embarrassment. He nodded stiffly to her, but she only smiled and walked away. By noon, whispers filled the base. Who was she really? How did she know the flight systems so well? Rumors spread. Some said she was part of a classified task force, others said she was a test pilot once, but the truth remained hidden until the day of the base inspection. A week later, the Admiral of the region was supposed to visit, and everyone was tense. The hangar was spotless, the aircraft lined like soldiers ready for battle. Drake and his squad prepped for a demonstration. Alara was there again, quietly observing until the sirens blared, announcing the Admiral's arrival. Every soldier stood at attention. The black car stopped, the door opened, and to everyone's shock, Alara stepped out from the back seat, this time wearing the full uniform of an admiral, her shoulders gleaming with the silver stars. The officers froze. The same woman they had mocked, challenged, and doubted was in command of the entire base. The silence was thick enough to cut through steel. She looked at them slowly, her calm gaze resting on Drake for a moment before she said, "Carry on." Everyone moved instantly, straightening postures, saluting, faces pale and hearts pounding. Drake could barely meet her eyes. She began the inspection, walking past each section, her comments sharp and insightful. she spoke to the engineers about maintenance, to the pilots about formation discipline, and to the logistics team about efficiency. Every word carried the weight of experience. She wasn't reading from a manual, she was the manual. When she finally reached the flight team, she paused, her voice steady. Lieutenant Drake stepped forward. He swallowed hard and did some, ma'am, he said softly. She studied him for a long moment, then said, you're talented, but arrogance clouds judgment. This base doesn't need showmen, it needs soldiers who can trust their team and follow orders. She let the words sink in before continuing, tomorrow you'll fly under my direct command and we'll see how much you've learned. He nodded, unable to speak. That night the base was buzzing again, but this time it wasn't mockery, it was respect mixed with fear and awe. Drake couldn't sleep. He replayed every mistake, every word she had said. The next morning came with a thick mist over the airfield. The mission was a combat simulation involving multiple squadrons and live electronic countermeasures. Drake felt the weight of every eye on him as he climbed into his cockpit. Alara was already airborne, her call sign Silver Hawk echoing over the comms, her voice calm as always. Team Alpha, maintain altitude 2,000 feet, initiate Delta formation when ready. He followed her instructions, this time without hesitation. They moved through simulated enemy fire. She anticipated every threat like she'd seen it before, her timing perfect, her control effortless. Halfway through the mission the system threw in an unexpected malfunction. Drake's engine sputtered, a red warning light flashing. He started to panic before her voice returned steady as ever. Lieutenant, cut auxiliary power, reroute through backup generator, switch to manual control now. He followed instantly and the jet steadied again. The simulation ended in success. Every pilot landed safely. The control tower erupted in applause. Alara walked toward the team, helmet in hand, her hair slightly tousled from the flight but her eyes bright. She smiled for the first time, a real smile. Well done, gentlemen. And then she looked at Drake directly. You learned fast. He straightened his posture and said quietly, only because you led well, ma'am. After that day respect for her spread across the base like wildfire. Recruits whispered her name like legend. They learned she had once flown in real combat zones, led rescue missions and earned medals for operations no one could talk about. Her file was classified but her actions spoke louder than any report. Under her leadership the base changed, discipline sharpened, morale rose. Even the most arrogant pilots learned humility through her example. Weeks later, during a real emergency when a training jet lost communication mid-air, Alara herself took off to locate it. Despite storm conditions she flew through lightning and wind until she spotted the lost pilot, guiding him back with precise instructions. The whole base watched her land, drenched but unshaken. When the young pilot stepped out, tears in his eyes, she simply said, next time trust your instruments, and walked away. That image of her walking through the rain became legend, the story told to every new recruit. They challenged the new girl, not knowing she was their admiral, their protector, their teacher, their test and their leader. Years later, when Drake himself became a commander, he would tell new cadets the same story, reminding them that strength doesn't shout, it commands quietly from within. And every time someone laughed at a quiet new face, he would smile and say, careful before you challenge the new girl, she might just be the admiral of the base.